Ariel Rich is a master's student in women's spirituality and social justice at the California Institute of Integral Studies. Her research explores motherhood, grief, artistic expression, time, and the sacrality of the body through feminist, womanist, and Jungian lenses, while also incorporating theoretical physics, conceptual mathematics, and cosmology. Ariel's work weaves together academic scholarship, ritual practice, and community activism in pursuit of embodied healing and collective liberation. Welcome, Ariel. Please educate us.
Hello, everybody, and thank you so much, Vivien, for that introduction. All right, I am going to bypass the bit where I would normally honor and situate the land on which I reside and the standpoint from which I come to you from, as well as I usually like to do some type of grounding and centering, but we've got a lot to cover, and for the sake of time, I'm going to skip all that. I do just want to do a really quick expression of gratitude to each and every one of you for your presence and attention and energy. And the last thing I want to note is that these slides are pretty dense. There is no need for you to feel like you need to read through everything, but you are welcome to do so if that is helpful to you as you take in information. But I promise I am going to read or speak to every word. So if you'd rather just listen along, that is also a wonderful choice. It's really a choose your own adventure as we head into where time is held, the maternal ethos, and mystical ontology. This presentation explores the conceptualization of the maternal ethos as both a sacred art form and an ontological framework through which the mystical nature of time can be considered and understood. Through personal narratives and scholarly research on artistic expression, motherhood, and grief, my inquiry aims to show how maternal ways of being can open sites of existential reflection, spiritual depth, socio-political resistance, and liberation. In bringing the maternal ethos and time into conversation, this study highlights an intimate relationship within the divine co-creation of reality. My research for this cumulative portfolio in its entirety draws on interdisciplinary perspectives from feminist and womanist theories, mysticism, and theology, while also incorporating physics and fractal geometry in order to position maternality beyond biological definitions or domestic functions, allowing the maternal ethos to emerge as an embodied spiritual practice of creation, care, presence, surrender, and transformation. This presentation focuses on a specific section of my work that considers principles from theoretical physics and conceptual mathematics in order to frame our experience of time through the maternal ethos, revealing it as relational, participatory, and spiralic rather than linear or fixed, and furthermore investigates the implications of this profound verity. We are going to start with a section called Relativity, Quantum Entanglement, and Metaphysical Connection, specifically in the realm of quantum physics and with the law of resonance, which tells us that at the subatomic level, particles do not need to touch in order to influence each other. They do not need to be in the same room or the same hemisphere or even the same point in time. They simply have to vibrate at the same frequency. We know that every object has a frequency or a set of frequencies at which it naturally vibrates. And resonance allows small, repeated inputs from a matching frequency to cause large, destructive, or constructive movements and shifts in the most energy efficient and powerful way. This is significant because we know through the laws of nature that objects are always orienting towards what is most efficient. And in this case, it also happens to be the most powerful. And what it tells us is that we don't actually attract or enable what we are actively or vigorously wanting or chasing. Our lives are, in fact, constructed by attracting and manifesting simply through what we are. So then we know when seeking transformation, we don't actually need to depend on anything outside of ourselves in order to affect change. Frequency shifts when you shift, and materialized reality shifts when frequency shifts. So relationships, opportunities, realities, recurring patterns, they're all made visible through this law of resonance. And when we bring this into conversation with the concept of time, we can look at a major idea in temporal consciousness theory, which is just the subjective experience of time passing, which is that we do not experience time as a sequence of isolated instants. We actually experience change, succession, and duration as unified episodes of awareness or consciousness. And from this point of view, when we bring in a resonance-based model incorporating those frequencies, it suggests that the felt flow of time depends on rhythmic coordination in the brain, such that changes in coherence or synchrony might alter how long, continuous, or immediate time seems. Through this finding, we can glimpse and access a profound metaphysical implication from temporality through the maternal ethos. Because if time is proven to be relational based on these frequency matching principles, then the lived experience of time that differentiates between subjects is actually a fundamental truth of temporality. Now, we can use this to look at various expressions of the maternal ethos. For me, that sometimes most tangibly comes through my experiences of motherhood, but it also happens through my past experiences as a professional dancer, and it could do so through any form of artistic creation or expression or energy spent towards social justice or et cetera, et cetera. But we're going to think here about the newborn phase, a domain in which the maternal figure and child are operating in completely different temporal frames, where an infant is oriented entirely toward immediate need and extreme presence to each moment, while a mother holds the history of her entire life, all of her responsibilities, all of her hopes, all of her griefs. And I do just want to take a moment to note here that in the breadth of my work, grief is really integral to the conceptualization of the maternal ethos. And I don't have time to properly dive into it today, but I just did want to take a second to note and honor the presence of grief in this work. But through the connection of the temporal frames in the maternal and the infant, we see that they interpret and influence one another. The presence of the maternal shapes the infant's sense of safety and attachment, while the infant's very existence reshapes the maternal figure's temporal pacing and understanding. So they may not be in the same temporal frame, but they exist in a pure state of relational temporal interdependence because of their frequency matching. And this tells us where there is care, presence, and mutual responsiveness, there is a very particular texture and density of time. Now, quantum entanglement is another extraordinary phenomenon in which we see separate particles existing as correlated in such a way that their behavior and the observation of their behavior instantaneously affect one another. Creations and connections formed through the maternal ethos are fundamentally quantum in this sense, because while separation might occur in various phases or stages, entanglement remains in perpetuity as a form of lived experiential mysticism. Moreover, the implications regarding observation itself are quite powerful. There are a couple famous experiments within the world of physics where scientists were looking at the characteristics of light. And if you experiment in a certain way, light gives you the characteristics of acting like a wave. Yet if you introduce an observer to the experiment, then the light starts to act like particles, which tells us that just the mere presence of an object observing another object shifts the characteristics of its nature. So when it comes to the life of a child, we can now see that their becoming unfolds through relationship and through being attended to, but also by being witnessed, such that the observer and the observed are entangled in this process of mutual evolution. Okay, we're going to shift now and bring in some fractals and pattern utilization from the realm of geometry. Fractal geometry offers a mathematical language for understanding structures that exhibit self-similar patterns across different scales, patterns that repeat and recur infinitely within finite boundaries. So as Carrie Welch writes, fractals provide a mathematical context in which infinity within finite boundary makes sense, offering a way of seeing infinity within time itself. This insight is especially resonant within the maternal ethos because motherhood is often lived through finite embodied moments that carry infinite relational indications and meanings. A single act of care can echo across generations. A moment of presence can contain the whole architecture of love, responsibility, and becoming. Fractals therefore help articulate what maternal life already reveals, that the seemingly small and the immeasurably vast are not separate, but mutually implicating. So we know that the universe is organizing itself in accordance with these laws of nature that repeat themselves. In 1610, Johann Kepler, who was a German mathematician and astronomer, was walking along a bridge in Prague when it began to snow. And he stops to take in the beauty and marvel at it. And he starts catching snowflakes and he starts noticing that Not some, not most, but all. Every single snowflake has this very identical geometric makeup of having six corners. And he spends the next few years noticing this everywhere in the natural world, from snowflakes to honeycombs to pomegranates and flowers and snail shells and seeds and on and on and on. And he declares, I actually don't know what the hell this means, but I'm pretty sure it's significant. If we flash forward 3 centuries, Charles Munger inspires a shift from this pattern recognition to a pattern utilization. And he starts connecting what he sees in psychology and physics and biology and economics and human behavior to create what he calls a lattice work of mental knowledge. He's bringing these disciplines that have no obvious reason to speak to each other into conversation with one another. And he creates this unified system through that for making decisions. And this actually made Munger one of the greatest investors who ever lived. And importantly, this is not because he had any more information than anybody else, but because he could see how patterns in one field explained what was happening in a completely different realm. And we're going to get back to what I believe to be the significance of those implications. But for right now, we're going to bring in the fact that we find the maternal ethos reflected in fractal temporality in its very nature, because each moment of creation, care, presence, and surrender contains echoes of other moments, other phases, and other forms of relation, both previously experienced and also yet to unfold, where the cycles of generation and grief spiral inward and outward, recapitulating themselves as related and self-referential without ever being merely identical. A fractal structure can be infinitely complex within finite dimensions, and maternal time likewise contains infinite depth within embodied and contingent life. Creation is not a singular event, but an ongoing process of reiteration. Each act of care renews and reanimates the relational fabric first made possible through that initial spark of creation, and each moment of presence reenacts the maternal gesture of showing up, holding space, and attending to another's inherent and unfolding essence. So, in the full breadth of my work, I engage with womanist and feminist scholars and theorists to reveal mothering as spiritual, political, relational. Um, Brilliant people such as Andrea O'Reilly and Leila Fernandez and Layli Maparayan. And now we see that this mothering is also patterned, recursive, and mathematically mystical. And fractals help name this sacred repetition through which life becomes legible as both finite and infinite, both embodied and transcendent. Ultimately, the maternal ethos invites a reorientation towards selfhood, relationship, time, and the world. It suggests that to mother in the broadest and most expansive sense is to participate in the ongoing co creation of reality through attention, responsibility, and love. And time then is not a container in which life happens. It is a dynamic and relational field through which life continuously emerges. And the reason I think this is also interesting and that the implications are so vast and so significant is that if we can garner a language and an understanding around these fundamental laws of nature that are proven to us through physics and mathematics, if we can bring that language into conversation with our ideas through womanism and feminism and ecology and our efforts toward social justice and collective liberation, especially through a lens like the maternal ethos situated inside of women's spirituality, then we're adding to our lattice work of mental knowledge, such that we can attract what's meant for us. We can create shifts that cause the change that's necessary for the world in not only the most efficient way, but the most powerful way. And then the decisions we make and the various investments we commit ourselves to have the potential to shape the very fabric and texture of time and life itself. Now, there were two additional super cool concepts that I just wanted to note. I don't have time to like fully delve in, but I just had this feeling they might resonate or spark something within somebody. The first one is the law of requisite varieties that comes to us from mathematical systems that tells us in any system at all, the element with the most flexibility controls the entire system, not the strongest or the loudest or the one that's been around the longest, but the most flexible, the component that can adapt to the most variables, the one who can bend the most without breaking, change approach without changing vision, hold the goal loosely and carefully enough to let the universe reroute them towards it. She runs the system. Flexibility is not a weakness. Mathematically, it is the most powerful position in any system you will ever be in, which is super cool. And the other one is the paradox of quantum mechanics and general relativity from physics. Quantum mechanics describes the behavior of matter and energy at atomic and subatomic scales. And general relativity, which comes to us from Einstein, describes how the universe works at the cosmic level. Think about gravity, space-time, the behavior of galaxies. Both of these are proven to be true over and over and over again. In fact, they have never failed, yet they are completely irreconcilable with each other. They are two frameworks that are both true, they are both proven, they are both describing the same universe, and yet fundamentally they contradict each other. When they are put into equations with one another, the math starts glitching. You get infinities and zeros where you should get actual answers. And I love this because it's just like the paradox, the mystery. It is inherent and predestined and seemingly by design. And it just shows us the beauty and meaning in the enigma. And then the question is just, what will we do with this structural, paradoxical liminal space? Here, I just wanted to show kind of a more complete breakdown of my scholarly paper. We focused on these two sections, but as you can see, there's a lot more that goes into and comes through it. And if anyone ever wants to speak about those, I would be so happy to. And then finally, I didn't have the time to call out all of my sources and inspirations as I went through the slides, but I wanted to take a moment to note them here. And then I know I am bumping right up against my time, so I will wrap this up quickly, but I just wanted to take a brief moment for personal reflection. When I started this program, I was in a deep place of despair and disorientation after my mom passed away and my children were very young, and I was coming into myself as a mother in my own right. And there is something about giving this cumulative presentation on my conceptualization of the maternal ethos as we enter into Mother's Day weekend that feels deeply profound. I know it's a problematic holiday that is Hallmark coded and brings up a lot of feelings and emotions for myriad valid reasons, but I just want to take a moment to honor the maternal ethos that I see coming to fruition through each and every one of you. And thank you for including me in this sacred community and holding this space for me. It is the greatest gift.
Wow. Thank you, Ariel. Just mind-blowing. We have a couple of minutes for questions. So I already see one hand raised. Logan?
Oh my gosh, I couldn't even help it. I was eating up everything, not like integrating everything because that will take more time, but eating up everything. Ariel, that was so beautifully presented. I just knew that I had to call back, especially as you said you couldn't go further into grief, but you mentioned grief as integral to this exploration for you. I feel that you were portaling in the wisdom that was almost serving as the answer to your question that you asked me in my presentation about how that legacy building between you and your mom can be shifted through presence, can be reconstructed through presence. And I guess the question that I want to reflect back on is this what form witnessing takes in your perspective. I hear you, and I don't imagine that when you say witnessing, you mean specifically and exclusively like visually witnessing, but witnessing with the spirit, the heart, the presence. And I'm curious if you could speak to what parts of ourselves of witnessing, like what is that? What is that spiritual process? What does that manifestation look like? And if there are any witnessings you think are specific to the maternal ethos.
That's such a beautiful and in-depth question, and also one that I suppose I can answer for myself, but not on behalf of any sort of larger collective, because I think it is so unique. When I think about the maternal ethos and the essence of creation and care, especially in the parenting of children, but also in the culmination of any type of work that comes forth through our intrinsic essence. There's part of us that has to overcome the desire to control or predestine. Um, and when we take a positionality of pure witnessing, like you said, it's not that is an inactive position. It is still very much engaged and present, but there is a surrender, which also is part of my core, that comes with a inherent unfolding. And so it took me a while to learn, like with my own children, I had some comical conflict with my daughter when she was young because she just is who she is. And it was like the moment that I embraced that, we could really not only enjoy each other, and I don't want to say that's frivolous and act like frivolity is less than other things, but we could more fully be and bloom into ourselves together. And so I think the essence of witness is surrender for me.
That is absolutely brilliant. And I love this so much. For everyone else, if you have a question for Ariel, if you have a statement, if you just want to be blown away by her brilliance, feel free to write in the chat. Ariel is here for the next 3 hours. She will read and see and can respond to you in the chat. So anything else, please put it in the chat. Okay. Goddess Queen Jahmela is a scholar, practitioner, and master's candidate in philosophy and religion at the California Institute of Integral Studies, whose research centers the cosmological reconstitution of Black diasporic women through the convergent registers of spirit, body, and land. Based in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, she brings over 15 years of ceremonial and transformational practice across the African continent to her scholarly work, grounding her phenomenological inquiry in lived, embodied knowledge. She is the founder of Free the Feminine, creator of the spiritual membership platform My Sister's Sanctuary, and ceremonial gathering Daughters of the Water, and an incoming PhD candidate in African Feminist Studies at the University of Cape Town. And I will be placing her website in the chat if you want to go and visit all of her amazing offerings. Goddess Queen Jahmela, please illuminate us.
Give thanks and praise. Thank you so much. Peace and greetings, everyone. Peace and greetings. Thank you so much for that introduction, Vivien, and greetings to everyone in the room. I see some familiar faces, and my daughter and an elder. My aunt is here, another Vivien. So, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start with song. So I'm just going to start with singing a song to ground us all together. It's going to be really quickly, and then we're just going to go on from there. Ite were nita oshun, ite were nita ya. Ite were nita oshun, ite were nita ya. Ocho keniba nita oshun, sheke nita oshun. Ite were nita oshun, ite were nita ya. Ite were nita oshun, ite were nita ya. Ocho keniba nita oshun, sheke nita oshun, ite were. All right, peace and greetings, everyone. So today we are talking about, let's see if we can get up in here, this transition from colonial Christianity to indigenous cosmology, and the transition that's taking place where Black women in the diaspora are reconstituting sacred authority. So I'm going to be navigating us through this journey in this presentation. Thank you all for joining me. Let me start a little bit just by, repeating some of what Vivien said. I think it's important to note what my positionality and background is before we dive in. Of course, I'm the founder of freethefeminine.com, which is a spiritual haven for Black women in the diaspora. I am an Ifa practitioner and an Iyan Ifa, which is a priestess of Ifa. I'm a ceremonialist. I am a sacred woman, and I am a master's candidate, with this program coming to a close. And I will be transitioning into PhD study at University of Cape Town doing African feminist studies. And I think it's really important when it comes to positionality to also note that I'm not just speaking as a researcher. but I'm speaking as someone who has lived experience, who's literally living the same experience that I am researching. So even with this particular capstone, with this thesis type of study, it has been very challenging to not just sit in epistemology and sit in my knowing, but also to utilize external sources to show this phenomenon taking place outside of myself. So my positionality as an insider, it gives me this depth and this access and this embodied understanding that outside researchers cannot replicate. But I do have to acknowledge that my personal investment in this work requires conscious reflexivity and rigorous methodological transparency throughout the research project to ensure integrity in my findings. So this is something I have to note for the record when it comes to positionality. So initially, and like Vivien mentioned, I transitioned from the United States. I'd grown up in Atlanta, and I moved from there to Africa about 6 years ago. And when I first came to Africa, there was a burning question that I had within me. And the question that I had originally was, what was it that continental Africans were receiving spiritually that those of us who were born in the diaspora did not have access to? What was it that separated us from a spiritual context? How were we nurtured differently? And in doing that type of research, when I first entered the program 2 years ago, I was really hyper focused on rites of passage programs and how rites of passage programs had gone from being in the continent to being in America. But at a certain point, things started to change, and I started to note that there weren't exact replicas of these same rites of passage programs in the same format that they were being delivered on the continent. And what I started to see as I did more and more research on the Black diaspora is a rupture between the Black diaspora and specifically colonial Christianity. And we're going to talk a little bit about that that type of Christianity and its effects. But then these questions then came up when I started to study and research why was the rupture taking place between Black women and their specific relationship with Christianity. And then how are Black diasporic women finding and embracing ATR or African traditional religions and indigenous cosmologies? And how do we name that process? Like, how do we name it? And really, what makes it significant? What makes this process such a big deal? Why is it important? So let's talk a little bit about colonial Christianity. And I'm looking to the side to just look at my timer because, yes, we are not playing around today. So colonial Christianity as rupture. This system of religion was utilized very early in the Black community and weaponized as a tool for slavery and a tool for indoctrination. Colonial Christianity was used by colonizers in colonizing Black and brown and indigenous populations, not just in the continent, but across the world. And not only did this type of religion, not only did Christianity cause a rupture from the indigenous way of studying spiritually, but this also set standards because when missionaries came into the schools, missionaries would be teaching standards of morality. They were teaching the students how to process, how to think about the divine, how to think about God. So all of this really added a level of ownership to divinity that changed and disrupted the system that indigenous spirituality begets. The other thing to acknowledge is that there was a heavy level of demonization when it came to indigenous methods and worship and African traditions. There was a lot of accusations made that giving reverence to ancestors was considered to be demonic, and in essence ancestors were considered to be demons. So there was a complete severance of this acknowledgement of ancestral energy and giving veneration to those who had come before. And so not only do we see that there is a shift to move to this white God, this male God, this monotheistic religion, but there's also an authority system that was imposed in the indoctrination of colonial Christianity. So we see how this control extended over morality, spirituality, religion, worship, reverence, and God. So these things existed. That suppression existed, that indoctrination existed with the emergence of, or the enforcement and the force of Christianity on Black populations and Indigenous populations. But also we see that there is a shift as well, especially in America, when it comes to owning this religion as well. And so we see the emergence later on of the Black church. We see the emergence of hoodoo, which is a indigenous study, an indigenous approach that was created by Black diasporic women in the Americas. Hoodoo is specific to the Americas, and it's its own way of studying spiritually, but it is a partner. It's in partnership with Christianity, let's say that. So they coexist. So there is a lot to digest when you are looking at these specific pieces of how Christianity influenced the Black diaspora. So now we see that there's a shift. So what's happening now? What's happening now is that there has been a shift where Black women in the diaspora are now embracing indigenous African studies of cosmology. We see that sacred women has emerged, with Kemetic studies led by Queen Afua. We see that African traditional religions have also emerged. Rites of passage programs have also emerged. And even plant medicine as indigenous cosmology, once thought of as a hallucinogen, plant medicine has been proved to be a gateway for spiritual experience and spiritual evolution and higher consciousness. So all of these things have emerged. Black women are leaving Christianity and engaging in spirituality outside of institutional religion in these formats and exploring ancestry, land, ritual, and plant-based practices across the board. And the biggest thing for you to understand is that my thesis and my capstone is not really centered on the concept of replacing one religion with another. I want to just make sure I say this and I make it very clear that my thesis is about the reconstitution of spiritual authority. And let me just note that spiritual authority is what we're speaking about. This is the effect that Christianity had on this population. They had assumed spiritual authority and dictated what the divine looked like, what it felt to be divine, what all of these things looked like. And reconstitution is a bit different from reclamation. Reclamation is going back to recover something, is going back to take something, to find something. You're going to claim something, reclaiming something that was lost. And then it assumes that whatever you're reclaiming, it's the same way that you would be, going back and getting it in its original condition. So it kind of centers you losing it and then going back to get it. But instead of looking at this as reclamation, which is what I was kind of doing in the beginning when I first migrated, I have identified this as reconstitution, because what's happening is that there were many different pieces there were many different pieces in this spiritual identity of Black diasporic women who had been commingled, different areas of the continent, different areas of the world had been mixed in together to create Black diasporic women. And now we are reconstituting these pieces. So in this reconstitution, it is not linear. It's not a linear process. It's not that we can go back to this address and actually pick up something. Black diasporic women are reconstructing and reconstituting sacred knowledge. And the way that this knowledge is even being reconstituted is very significant because it is ancestral forward. Ancestrals are teaching in real time through divination. Ancestors are teaching through dreams. Ancestors are teaching through the body. Black women are passing knowledge to each other, learning from each other through sacred women's circles, through sister circles, through initiation, through plant medicine ceremonies. And then the practice is itself is teaching. The practice of reconstitution is pedagogy because it's literally teaching us about these different methods of creating spiritual authority. So it's coming through relationship, through practice, through embodiment. And all of this just points to its indigeneity. So this is very significant. And this is why I want to make sure we understand that this process of reconstitution is emergent because it's a new thing that is developing. It's something new. It's something beautiful, and it's something original. And it's not identical to what was lost. So I hope that all makes sense. And then I have a short clip. I created a series as part of this capstone work. I created a series to do public facing discourse and to speak to women, have conversations with 12 women who had left Christianity and did this same process of reconstituting the sacred. And I'm gonna see if this will play. All right. You all please let me know if you can hear it.
Just please, of my mind though.
Okay, hold on. No.
And that's when I, had this spiritual, whole, choice and awakening at that point. And the world outside of Christianity is vast, so you got to take your time.
Right.
Can
you hear it?
And I'm stepping out of a boat that
Yes.
I've always been into.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's just through a lot of reading and a lot of being aligned. I have a spiritual guide she's my godmother, who was a part of the Village Cultural Arts Center. Again, all of my things have been aligned, and I've been placed in places to meet individuals who have helped to guide my journey. Mm-hmm. And so, but my godmother in the tradition, I met her at the Village Cultural Arts Center, and she's still, my spiritual guide and my godmother today in the tradition. I practice New African Vodun, and I practice Isheshe, and the liberation of my mind, though, came through education, came through understanding hoodoo and realizing how it showed up in my own family.
Okay, so we're going to pause there because I don't want to get kicked off by my instructor for taking up too much time. But what the sister here, Jacqueline, was really articulating was just her journey from growing up in Christianity, in Holiness Church, and then transitioning into, as she named, hoodoo and Isheshe, and New African Voodoo, and all of these things that I learned in having these conversations were kind of mind-blowing, because a lot of the women who I spoke to really emphasized that there's no beef with Jesus Christ, with Jesus Christo, with Christ consciousness. There's no beef with Christ itself. One of the people that I interviewed also talked about Christ as an ancestor. There was a lot of understanding and connection about Christ consciousness, but there was definitely a clear emphasis on how important it was to be in alignment with indigenous practices that beget the culture, that encompass the culture, that fed more into the ethnic identity of these particular people in the diaspora. So this particular series is on my YouTube channel, and it will be on the next season of my podcast. So that is that. And so just to kind of wrap things up, the takeaway: reconstitution, not reclamation, okay? And this really centers Black women's agency and creativity, and it honors the ongoing nonlinear, generative work of spiritual reconstruction. Black women are not recovering something that was lost, but Black women are creating something completely brand new. So I'm going to close now. And I will say that as I continue this research, before anyone asks, as I continue this research, I'll be adding on two components: reconstituting the land, reconstitution across land, and reconstitution in the body. So before I close, I'm just going to close with song again. And if you all could just take a moment, take a deep breath, and thank you.
Wow, so transformative. The work you are doing in the world is just extraordinary. Thank you so much, Goddess Queen Jahmela. We do have time for some questions, and I see one hand already raised, so go ahead.
Congratulations, Goddess Queen. Such a joy to see you present your work, and congratulations on your PhD next step. My question was about, I really like this concept of reconstitution over reclamation, and I wanted to know who are some of the major scholars that you've been drawing upon, and like where do you see yourself pushing beyond what you've read in the scholarship?
That's such a good question, and only Alka could just come on here and turn this into a whole entire critical thinking moment. Okay. Thanks a lot. So, there's quite a few scholars. I will say that one of the ones that has had me in a chokehold is M. Jackie Alexander, who writes about this bridge and, walking over the bridge, and then pedagogy. And what I find is that this reconstituting in and of itself is pedagogy, because it's the process of learning and teaching. And in the song, in this song, I'm singing songs that were sang hundreds and thousands of years ago. A song to Obatala. Obatala is my godfather, but Obatala is a deity. And this I'm learning and I'm teaching in essence, in my learning and in teaching. So M. Jackie Alexander is probably like the key force. Also, I would say Alexis Pauline Gumbs as well. There's just a lot of and this may be too far into the discourse, but like in looking at this her work on Afrofuturism, I feel like there's some kind of simultaneous like creation of Sankofa study, what's
Mm.
taking place for the future and what we create, and what's happened in the past, what's already happened. So there's like this Afrofuturism and the study of revolutionary mothering and mothering through ancestral work. So there's that. And then where I see the gaps, there's a lot of work when it comes to black, the black population and Christianity in terms of, just the relationship with Christianity and etc. But when it comes to my work, it's very different because it's the diasporan experience is so it's such a big variable. It's so big. It's such a really huge variable. And even in the beginning of the research, I was super confused because a lot of the work that I was looking at was talking about just the continent, the continent, the continent, the continent. And this is not, that's why I keep saying black diasporic women, because if I say black women, that includes women on the continent. If I say or historic diasporan is who I'm speaking about. So those are who are twice removed, three generations removed, 4 generations removed. So all of these things are very relevant in looking at new ways of studying this type of literature. I hope that answers the question, but I know there's always follow-up.
That was a great
free.
response where I put you right on the spot. So well done. And I feel like I need to when I was in grad school, there was in a women's studies program, there was so little discussion of spirituality. And M. Jackie Alexander was one of the scholars that we were assigned because she's so academically like rich and dense. And I was like, yes. So thank you for reminding me of her work. And I will name drop a little bit. I actually got to meet her when she visited University of Washington many years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, very cool. It was very wonderful. So thank you for a great answer.
We have
And
time for one more quick question. So go ahead. We have a hand raised.
Hey, girl.
Hi, Nina. Greetings.
Okay. So, aren't you afraid that you are putting it in diasporic only? What happened with the woman on the continent? That's because I'm from the continent and I feel like
we know
I cannot participate in your thing that is not for me, although I'm diasporic too because I live here now. So you have an idea to bridge it?
Yeah, that's a good question, Nina, and thank you for asking. Nina is from Rwanda, and we acknowledge that there is a lot of research that has been done continentally already, and what makes this so significant, Nina, it's such a good question. What makes it so significant is the fact that when you are continentally born, that means that you have had more access to being able to see things, even if you didn't choose those things, but you've had access to be able to interact with, be aware of, and to see things that someone who is diasporan, 5 generations removed, transatlantic slave trade, commingled into that family history, that person has not ever been exposed to it. They have had to go on an independent journey to piecing these things together. Even like I said, me singing in another language, I can't sing Kenya Rwanda because I didn't grow up in a place where I heard Kenya. My mother's tongue is not Kenya Rwanda. The only language that I've ever known is English, and I've had to learn every piece of indigenous language that I know. So all of these things just gives us a different experience, and this is the reason why this has too has to be studied. So I just want to, acknowledge that, and also acknowledge my elder, like I said, Vivien in the room, who is 82 years old. I think she's 82. If I'm telling a story, I apologize. But Miss Vivien, thank you so much for being here. And I also want to acknowledge my sister Adenike, and I also want to acknowledge my daughter Katora, who keeps speaking in the chat. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you, Goddess Queen Jahmela. Wonderful, beautiful, could listen to you all day long. For anyone who has a question and didn't get to answer it, or just wants to connect with Goddess Queen Jahmela, you can do so in the chat. So any comments, questions, put them in the chat and she can answer you there. And now I get the pleasure of introducing you to our next amazing scholar, who is Samantha Turner. Samantha Turner is a fourth-generation Detroiter who derives inspiration and passion for her work from her community. She has a BS in psychology with a minor in women and gender studies from Michigan State University, is a certified full-spectrum doula, and a women's spirituality master's candidate at the California Institute of Integral Studies. Samantha is dedicated to creating spaces and a practice that promote healing, self-actualization, and safety for marginalized peoples. She moves within and interacts with the world from an eco-womanist mindset and hopes to help others achieve multi-generational healing from systemic and interpersonal traumas through her work. Welcome, Samantha. I am so happy to hear you speak.
Thank you. It's so good to be here. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. And we're about to share slides. My classmate Logan, shout out to Logan, is assisting me with presenting my slides today. So thank you so much. Alrighty. So to begin, hello, everyone. As beautifully said by Dr. Vivien, my name is Samantha Turner, and thank you so much for joining me on this journey of self-reclamation, healing work, and recognition of Black American eco and decolonial activisms. I'm a women's spiritualities master's candidate, full spectrum doula, healthcare worker, and a historian. I also identify as an eco-womanist, a healer, and a conduit of ancestral messages and traditions. It was 1 year ago today that I heeded the call from my spiritual team to become a doula, which is a person who non-medically assists with the processes of perinatal care in labor and delivery. I am greatly inspired by eco-womanist, spiritualist, and trauma healing frameworks that have been combined together to create an experience for pregnancy care that is somatic, expressive, creative, and ancestral. By supporting the minds, bodies, and spirits of my clients, which is the source of the name Mind, Body, and Soul Holistic Services, I hope to help my clients address and heal from their intergenerational and personal traumas, learn about their bodies, pleasures, and desires, and to form a relationship with their children that is fueled by love and acceptance rather than apprehension and fear. This presentation is an examination of how these aspects of thoughts and action in the form of birth work and healing work, eco-womanism, and decolonial practice have come together to heal myself, my bloodline, and my community. And before we get into the content of this presentation, this can be a silent practice, but I would just like to take a moment for everyone to reflect and ground. So for those of you who have a womb space, I would like you to guide your hands to that womb space gently and hold or caress yourself while reflecting on the type of emotions and sensations you feel when you focus on that area of your body. If you don't have a womb space, that's okay. Just place your hands on a part of your body that you feel called to place those hands on. And I want you to breathe deeply, and upon inhaling, fill this space with good intentions and love and prayers. And as you exhale, I want you to release any unwanted tension and discomfort. Thank you. Okay. So I began my work with looking at the history of Black midwives, root workers, and medicine women. So the practices of Black American midwives, healers, and root workers were derived from the ancient traditions and knowledges passed on to us by our many great ancestors. Midwives, medicine women, shamans, and healers were oftentimes considered to be a unique category of beings who towed the line between the mortal and the spiritual realms. Even though our ancestors experienced the violent dehumanization of enslavement and were ripped from their communities and cultures by Euro-American colonizers between the 16th and 19th centuries, they still remained and retained a great deal of their spiritual, religious, ethnic knowledges that related to healing, birthing, farming, communication, surviving, and other types of existential things. So on Western soils, African traditional religions, or ATRs, were oftentimes combined with religious practices from Western cultures, especially Christianity, to create new forms of prayer, worship, and medicine. Within the context of the American South, one of those traditions that Black enslaved people crafted and utilized is called hoodoo, which is a spiritual and cultural practice that combines Christian psalms and biblical understandings with ATRs to venerate and communicate with the Holy Spirit, ancestors, and nature for the intended purposes of healing, protection, and spiritual enrichment. Under this category falls root work, which is a relationship hoodoos have with plants and the natural world, where we steward, understand, and acknowledge the land in return for protection, healing, and refuge. And just to have a quote by Renetta Mulkey in her writings called Black Birth, Culture, and Community, A Hoodoo Perspective. She says, quote, "In the narratives of many granny midwives, they did not refer to themselves as root workers or hoodoo practitioners, but still their practices surrounding pregnancy, both postpartum, aging, newborn or family illnesses, and death showed otherwise. These ways of knowing are enduring histories of Black women's knowledge production that began with the lessons that we learned at our grandmother's kitchen tables and are woven into the fabric of our writings and practices. Motherwit, root work, food as ancestral memory, mothering, and spirit work are all included in this frame of work," end quote. And so following the passing of the 13th Amendment, enslaved peoples were technically freed from bondage en masse, and they created many communities for themselves throughout the U.S. But unfortunately, freedom was not synonymous with full uninhibited personhood, and disparities in healthcare, resources, and social equities still remain for most Black people, especially working class and poor Black people. So therefore, Black people were still heavily dependent upon the root worker, the healer, and the granny midwife for treatments of illnesses, spiritual care, and connection with earth-based ways of knowing for another century after slavery was abolished here. And so intracommunal healers who were trained by seasoned elders, personal birthing experiences of their own, and ATR practitioners remained in demand until they were replaced by hospital systems and a federal push for widespread standardization of medical care. This push was, of course, rooted in Eurocentrism and patriarchal control over the bodies of women and children. And although the maternal and health outcomes generally improved for most women in the latter half of the 20th century due to more advancements in modernization in healthcare, obstetric racism caused racial healthcare disparities in birthing and perinatal care to become more prevalent over time. And so therefore, we're seeing younger generations of Black birthing people experiencing worse birthing outcomes than their mothers and grandmothers. And so Black fertility, pregnancy, birthing, and after-birth care in the U.S. has notoriously been shrouded by the darkness of hate and exploitation since the inception of this country. And when looking at some statistics for Black mothers and birthing people and their infants, the birth outcomes for Black women and babies demonstrate a consistent theme. The cohort experienced the worst of key health outcomes compared to other races and demographics of people, with the exception of American Indigenous women. They actually have very similar birthing outcomes to Black American women. But Black women lose their babies at a rate of almost 2.3 times greater than non-Hispanic white women. And the Black maternal mortality rate is 34 deaths per 100,000 live births, which is 3 times higher than the rate of that for white women. So several factors contribute to these outcomes, including racialized poverty, lack of access to perinatal care and assistance, racism in healthcare, and a phenomenon that's called weathering. And 1 in 6 Black women also, in a national study that was conducted, said that they reported feeling mistreated, inadequately cared for, violated, and operated on without their consent or knowledge, and also otherwise traumatized at some point throughout their pregnancy or birthing experience. And so we see on a personal level and a statistic level that the cyclical nature of this violence and exploitive system is oftentimes perpetuating harms at both ends of a lifeline. Like the impacts are seen from death into birth. We just never get a break. It is constantly exhausting. We are constantly not recovering and healing because we are bombarded by the system at any given time. And so recognizing the issue and countering its ideologies is the only way to discontinue the hurt, the brokenness, the disembodiment, and the isolation that has burrowed its ways into our bones. Radicalized, oppositional, and decolonial birth work is what preserved and carried us for centuries while we navigated plantations and ghettos and other colonial spaces where life was not meant to be cultivated. And it is this same ancestral, indigenous, and innate knowledge and consideration for one another that I believe has the potential to reclaim our bodies, our minds, and our spirits in present day. And so eco-womanism, like decolonial practice, calls for a great collective return to pre-colonial ways of existing that promoted indigenous sovereignty, plant-human connections, more expansive ways of expression, non-transactional connections and communal ethics, and eco-sensitive earth and water stewardship. While the concept of eco-womanism has existed for many generations, a person who crafted the name that is commonly used now and greatly expanded the mindset is writer, theologist, and professor Dr. Melanie Harris. And Eco-Womanism, African American Women in Earth Honoring Faiths. She wrote a guidebook for activists who center their outlook and lifestyles around reclaiming themselves, their ancestors, their communities, and their earth homes from the violent grips of white supremacy. She says, quote, "The religious lens of eco-womanism also points to earth-honoring faith practices led by women of African descent that provide models of contemplative practice of planetary and self-care. These kinds of eco-spiritual healing practices help women connect with the health of their self and their community, and the health of the planet as well. In other words, eco-womanism focuses on connections between Black women's health, spiritualities, and ecological concerns," end quote. So this statement directly connects with the intentions of eco-womanist activism, and it also connects to the African American spirituality and the revival of ancestral healing knowledges and the concept of birthing justice as well. And birthing justice is a movement that has been used to honor, support, and assist birthing peoples from marginalized groups with gaining access to proper perinatal support and advocacy. Moreover, the current push for Black doulas and midwives entering the field of birth work and perinatal care combines all of these ideas into one big idea. So doulas, as we know them in current Western society, became involved with the birthing process in the mid-20th century. And at this time, their capacity in clinical settings and availability was extremely limited. They were very niche and kind of just reserved for families who could pay out of pocket, which was usually upper middle class white families. And so current nationwide initiatives to reduce Black and Indigenous mother and child mortality and morbidity rates have made doula care more accessible via grants, extending insurance coverages, and by making care more accessible in clinical settings. According to the findings of a few studies, when birthing people are provided doula support, the risk of cesarean section is reduced significantly when compared to women without doula support. And this implementation improves the quality and safety of labor, and it reduces its overall cost. So the framework for Black birth work is concurrently preventative, responsive, and restorative. It involves healing from incomprehensible amounts of pain, trauma, and neglect that have occurred over centuries, and it works towards a better future despite socioeconomic setbacks that we still continue to face in the society. So to become re-embodied as a Black woman or feminine person is to first address the cause of disembodiment, colonialism. Eurocentric and colonial conceptions devalue everything we are in an attempt to strip us of our humanity and worth. From the time we are children, we are fed images and notions that suggest we are nothing more than our nappy hair, dark skin, fat bodies, and broad features. We are born at the intersection of Blackness and womanhood, and therefore considered to be inferior in every way and demoralized from the point of conception. The only way out of this is to step outside of these margins. But we cannot step back into the epicenter of whiteness where we will be washed out completely until we no longer exist. We must wander completely outside of the realms of society. And the first step to comprehending and imagining personhood through a more self-actualized lens is understanding and adopting a decolonial mindset. Decolonialism is the act of acknowledging the socioeconomic systems and structures that have been created and emboldened by hegemony and violence, and then deciding to reject and oppose these systems. So in continuity with decolonial and eco-womanist principles, I believe that new social, physical, and spiritual reconstructuring for Black women and feminine people would look like returning to our innate gifts that were given to us by God, the ancestors of the earth, and from our ancestors. The music in our bones, the stars in our eyes, the maps in our brains, and the love in our souls all have the ability to reshape our DNA if we allow them to do so. So this process will begin with trusting our instincts, healing our wounds, releasing our traumas, strengthening our communal bonds, and reaffirming our spiritual protections. Notably, I would like to also mention that abolitionist, herbalist, and Underground Railroad conductor Harriet Tubman became free in this way. She's kind of like a blueprint for an eco-womanist activism and mindset, because she allowed spirit, the trees, the waterways, the sky, and the earth to lead her and physically liberate her. And then she also returned back to the depths of bondage to liberate her people. So ultimately, by viewing ourselves as an extension of Earth and her creations, and then aligning with her commitment of valuing and preserving life that is diverse, enriched, and mystical, we can envision ourselves as beings who are inherently beautiful, powerful, ancient, and healing. So basically, I got into the field of birth work actually through CIIS. It was during my first semester that I did a Motherline project for a course that Dr. Williams taught. And when I was doing that presentation, even though I had rehearsed many times, when I was speaking about the pain, the trauma, and the sacrifices that the women in my bloodline had experienced, I wailed and I sobbed uncontrollably. And I could barely get to the presentation, but ultimately I did, by the grace of God, by the grace of the ancestors. And I felt presences in this room, the same room I'm in right now, that felt so powerful. And I felt their energies and feel like I could see beyond what the human eye could normally see. And I feel like these women in my family had laid their hands on me in a ceremonious way. And they told me that it was my time to pick up the mantle that had been put down many years ago for the sake of survival. And so after becoming a full certified doula, I began to think about the services that I would want to offer. And basically that awakening happened through my artwork, and my team, my spiritual team, gives me visions of the art that they want me to create, including the artwork that's shown on this slide here. And so I also, this artwork actually is called Birth Through Pleasure. And birth in this context has two meanings, which includes the literal birth of a child, which you can see happening in the womb, but also the symbolic birth of renewal and self-actualization. So pleasure is an essential process throughout the conception of the birthing process. Conception and birthing process. They're interrelated, but the commodification of the female body and reproductivity systems has stifled our access to it. Pleasure, whether it's physical, mental, spiritual, or erotic, is our birthright. Writer and activist Audre Lorde actually speaks a lot about pleasure and the erotic, and she describes it as an inner knowing that lives within us from the time we are born, but it is so often deferred or denied because the world takes it from us when they realize what our identities are. And so in alignment with the pleasure and erotic frameworks, I believe that in part my purpose is to invoke and awaken and inspire the erotic through healing practices. My business is focused around helping birthing people heal from intergenerational and personal traumas and stress by expressing themselves through creative, somatic, and spiritual practices. I would like to assist birthing people in 3 specific ways of healing and restoration, which include prenatal and pregnancy preparation and healing, postpartum healing, and healing in the event of an abortion, stillbirth, or unintentional pregnancy loss. I would also like to help people with acknowledging their gender and sexuality identities and assist them with spiritual and mental aspects of transitioning from one gender to the next. And so whether a birth is literal or figurative, it impacts the person spiritually, mentally, and physically. And it requires some form of patience, care, support, and respect. My work combines eco-womanist ideologies, ancestral knowledge, tactile and somatic rituals, and decolonized grief work to help my clients heal from disembodiment, dysfunction, and dysmorphia that's been caused by holding on to centuries of abuse and trauma. It is both preventative and prescriptive because it involves helping people after violences have occurred in their own lives, while also liberating our ancestral lines and freeing the generation of future children who have not yet been born. And in conclusion, as we begin to depart from the shaping of eco-womanist and Black spiritualist thought, I'd like to offer an excerpt from the poem that's called Unlearning to Not Speak by Marge Piercy. In this poem, she writes, "We must learn again to speak, starting with I, starting with we, starting as an infant does with her own true hunger and pleasure and rage," end quote. This statement, when I first read it, caused me to let out a huge yes. I just couldn't stop saying yes, because what we need now more than ever is a reintroduction to self. I need this reintroduction so I know everyone else in this space and beyond this space needs it as well. That connects ourselves with all of ourselves, past, future, present, all the above, to the Earth Mother, and to our spiritual guides who see us and love us deeper than we can ever imagine. When we are ready for this transformation and rebirth, they will be there, and patiently they are waiting for us, and they always have been. So thank you so much for allowing me to do this presentation, and I just appreciate everyone in this program, and just, yes.
Amazing! And you are literally going to be saving lives. That is so beautiful. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
We do have time for questions, so if anyone has a question for Samantha, now is the time to speak. And you can unmute yourself or throw a hand up.
Hi, Samantha. It's Lucia. I wanted to hop in, and I wasn't able to be off camera, but I wanted to quickly share how proud I am of you for going through your doulaship, and how Detroit is so fortunate to have you here. And I cannot wait to connect you into the doula community here. I love you. That's it.
Thank you. I love you too. Thank you.
Aw. Another question? Or just loving up Samantha and her beautifulness?
Yes to that. Yes to that. Loving you always, Sam. Just so deeply proud of you and humbled by the wisdom that you share. How can other people support this mission? What can they learn? What can they do? How can people who aren't occupying this beautifully compassionate and deeply, deeply embedded position be part of the shift that you would like to see reflected in the work that you do?
Wow, that is a gorgeous question. I would say people can get involved by doing what naturally comes to them. I think when talking about decolonizing work and eco-womanist work, everyone kind of fits into the puzzle or the mosaic by doing what they do best. I don't think anyone can really ever do the same thing because we have been gifted with so many abilities and talents and knowledges. And so I think the best thing would be to figure out, what do I want to offer to this collective? What do I want to offer to the revolution? What do I want to offer to my community or diaspora? And then finding networks and organizations that are maybe already generally doing that type of work. And then like seeing where you contribute or fit in, or even if you're not like, even if like that type of thing isn't your thing, just if you have the means to donating, or advertising for people or things like that, mutual aid, because that is always something that is needed and helpful. And there's so many people who do not even know what they can do yet because their basic needs aren't met. But if they have a community surrounding them to help with meeting those needs and support, then they can like wake that up and do whatever mission their guides and their ancestors and God and the spirits and whoever else is wanting them to do. So I would just say communicate and support and connect.
I put Samantha's website in the chat earlier on, so if anyone wants to check that out and connect with Samantha, you can do so that way. Do we have any other questions? We've got time for one more. Okay.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So good to see you, Samantha. It's been a while, and I was just, it's been a while since we've talked. So, are you still teaching? And if so, how do you see this emerging? What's emerging for you? How do you see that influencing your work with young folks?
Okay, so I'm not teaching anymore. Okay. And just I know when I was in Dr. Aurora's class, I was a young child teacher and I work with toddlers.
I thought it was like, okay.
Oh yeah, they're the babies, right?
I thought they were a little older than that, but yeah.
Oh yeah, no, they were way just really young. They were absolutely gorgeous. I miss the kids so much. But I would say if I were still in teaching, or even just a message to teachers or future teachers or people who work with children, I'd say like the first place to begin with them is to not, I guess you don't really have to do decolonial work. You just have to kind of do like ancestrally led, like activist focus, love focus, heart focus, culturally focused work with them, because they actually don't even have the concept of what it means to like live in a colonized state yet. They are literally blank slates and their minds are just so beautiful and constantly expanding. And with my kids, I would just love to not put the pressures of labels and certain identities on them. And I would like them to be able to express themselves how they see fit, regardless of race and gender. And I like to buy and support materials that do support diversity, that do support community action, that do support like understanding how to be a good community member. And just teaching that from the ground up and just like reaffirming that like gently with them, I feel like throughout their education and growth process is like the best thing you can ever do for a young mind, so they can just carry that with them and it just becomes innate. Like they don't even have to worry about unlearning or unpacking, because they just kind of have that ingrained in them from the time they're young. So that's
beautiful answer, beautiful response. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Samantha. Again, Samantha will be here the entire time. If you have additional questions, comments, put them in the chat. Samantha will read them and respond, and you will get some one-on-one love from her. It is my honor and pleasure to introduce you to our next scholar. Maya Stroud is 24 years old and aspires to pursue a career in medical anthropology with a focus on women's health. Her current interests include healthcare disparities affecting Black and Brown communities and the emerging field of femtech. Maya, please share with us all of your brilliance.
Okay, thank you so much for the introduction, Vivien. I'm really happy to be here, and today I'm presenting my work to you all about the history of traumas that Black women experience and what our healing journey looks like. I think it's a beautiful segue from Samantha's work because we explored similar themes. I will ask for everyone to hold their questions and comments until the end of the presentation, when I will acknowledge the chat and have time for a quick Q&A. From this point on, I would also like to add a trigger warning for the mentioning of domestic violence, abuse, and sexual assault. First, I would like to acknowledge that I approach this topic from a Black feminist and womanist perspective that centers the lived experiences, voices, and humanity of Black women. Black feminism recognizes that Black women face overlapping systems of oppression, particularly racism and sexism, which shape how abuse and trauma are experienced. Unlike traditional feminist frameworks that have historically focused on white women's experiences, Black feminist thought emphasizes intersectionality and acknowledges that Black women's struggles cannot be separated from race, class, gender, and historical oppression. A womanist perspective developed by Alice Walker, who is pictured, expands this idea by focusing on healing, spirituality, community, and the survival of Black women and their families. Womanism values the emotional and cultural strength of Black women while also recognizing the pain and generational trauma they carry. Through this lens, abuse is not viewed as an isolated issue, but as a part of a larger system rooted in slavery, discrimination, and societal neglect. A Black feminist and womanist approach also highlights resistance and resilience. It prioritizes creating safe spaces, accessible mental health resources, and supportive communities where Black women can speak openly, heal fully, and reclaim their power and identity. There are wounds that never show on the body that are deeper and more hurtful than anything that bleeds. Laurel K. Hamilton. Now, everyone, I want you to think about the word trauma. Most people imagine bruises, broken bones, or visible scars, but some of the deepest wounds cannot be seen at all. They live in the mind, the body, and the spirit. They change the way people love, trust, heal, and survive. Today, I want to talk about the hidden story of Black women and abuse. This is not only an academic topic for me, it is personal, it is historical, and it is urgent. Black women experience violence, trauma, and abuse at disproportionately high rates, yet our pain is often ignored, minimized, or erased. We're expected to be strong no matter what happens to us. We are taught to survive quietly. But survival should not require silence. Today, I want to walk through three major ideas: the historical background behind this trauma, the different forms of abuse and their lasting effects, what recovery, healing, and therapy can look like for Black women, and most importantly, I want people to leave understanding this. Healing is possible, but first, our stories must be acknowledged. With this, I want to quickly share my personal story. As a woman of color and an activist, the biggest part of my fight has always been helping women who look like me and those with whom I share experiences with. I know how it feels to walk through life with a target on your back and to constantly feel undermined because of the color of your skin. On top of this, it hurts even more to deal with the same type of abuse and inconsideration from people close to us and our loved ones. I am a survivor of intimate partner violence and sexual assault. These unfortunate situations have allowed me to understand firsthand how detrimental and traumatic an experience like that can be. They are intense and heavily stress-inducing. It can also make it hard to trust others and yourself moving forward. I want to make it known that anyone who has experienced any sort of violence or manipulation in their life is not alone. It gets better, and while the road to recovery is rough, it's the first step towards reclaiming your life. Now, to understand the trauma Black women experience today, we have to understand the history. The abuse of Black women in America did not begin recently. It is deeply connected to slavery, racism, sexism, and systemic oppression. For centuries, Black women's bodies were treated as property instead of human beings deserving care and protection. Enslaved women were sexually abused, exploited for labor, and even used in medical experimentation without anesthesia. Their suffering was normalized. And although history has changed, many of those attitudes still linger today. Black women live at the intersection of racism and sexism. That intersection creates unique vulnerabilities. We are often stereotyped as strong, aggressive, or angry, which causes society to overlook our emotional pain. People assume we can handle everything. But strength is not the absence of suffering. Studies show Black women experience intimate partner violence and psychological trauma at higher rates than many other groups. Many also experience trauma at younger ages, sometimes before adolescence. Imagine how that shapes a child's understanding of love, trust, and self-worth. At the same time, Black women are often denied equal access to mental health resources and health care. Even when seeking help, many are dismissed or invalidated. That creates a dangerous cycle of high exposure to trauma, low access to support, and pressure to remain silent. Clinical psychologist Inger Burnett Ziegler writes about how Black women appear strong on the outside while silently battling loneliness, unresolved trauma, depression, and shame. That idea deeply resonates with me. So many Black women are carrying emotional burdens alone because society has taught us vulnerability is weakness. But healing cannot happen in isolation. Community matters. Safe spaces matter. Being heard matters. And acknowledging these experiences is not about portraying Black women as weak. It is about fully recognizing our humanity. Next, I will move on to the types of abuse and what lasting effects can look like. When people hear the word abuse, they often only think of physical violence, but abuse can take many different forms. Physical abuse includes domestic violence and intimate partner violence. It involves behaviors meant to gain power and control over another person. This can include hitting, intimidation, sexual violence, stalking, or threats. Emotional and psychological abuse can be just as damaging, and sometimes it is even more damaging. Emotional abuse attacks a person's identity. It tears down self-esteem through manipulation, humiliation, isolation, and fear. Abusers often convince victims that they are worthless or incapable of surviving alone. Over time, the victim begins to believe it. One of the most devastating effects of abuse is how it changes the brain and the nervous system. Trauma rewires the way people respond to stress and relationships. After experiencing abuse, many survivors struggle with trust, anxiety, hypervigilance, depression, guilt, and emotional numbness. Even safe situations can begin to feel dangerous. As mentioned before, I am a survivor and I understand this personally. After my experience, I kept wanting my old life back. I wanted to feel like the version of myself that existed before the trauma. But eventually I realized something difficult. You do not return to the old version of yourself. Trauma changes you. In the aftermath of a traumatic experience, the individual finds herself caught between the extremes of amnesia or of reliving the trauma, between floods of intense, overwhelming feeling and arid states of no feeling at all, between irritable, impulsive action and complete inhibition of action, because the trauma repeatedly interrupts. The traumatized individual is unable to resume the normal course of her life. One of the hardest parts of healing is accepting that there is now a new normal. For a long time, I blamed myself. I questioned my judgment. I wondered why I stayed, why I trusted, and why I allowed someone to have power over me. The self-hatred can become another form of trauma, and many survivors experience the same thing. Abuse doesn't just hurt you physically or emotionally in the moment. It changes how you see yourself afterward. It changes relationships too. Many survivors build emotional walls because they fear being manipulated or harmed again. Trust becomes difficult. Vulnerability feels unsafe. Trauma teaches the body to stay alert even when danger is gone. That is why abuse is not something that simply goes away. Its effects can follow people for years, which is why recovery matters so deeply. Recovery is about reclaiming your life. Trauma changes brain chemistry and survival instincts. Many survivors remain in a constant state of fight, flight, or fear. Even small stressors can trigger overwhelming emotional responses. That is why support systems and therapy are so important. Healing often begins with one difficult step, asking for help. For many Black women, this step can feel uncomfortable because of stigma surrounding mental health or previous experiences with being dismissed. But seeking help is not weakness, it is courage. There are many therapeutic approaches that can help trauma survivors. Cognitive behavioral therapy, cognitive processing therapy, support groups, talk therapy, mindful practices, and survivor-centered therapies and programs. There are treatment programs like STEP, which is also known as Survivor Therapy Empowerment Program, and REACH, Beyond Domestic Violence, that have been very beneficial to helping you regain your independence as a survivor. Therapy teaches coping skills. It helps survivors recognize triggers, process emotions, and rebuild self-worth. For me personally, therapy taught me how to breathe through panic, calm my nervous system, and stop blaming myself for my trauma. But healing is bigger than therapy alone. Healing is spiritual, emotional, and communal. For Black women especially, healing also involves breaking generational cycles of silence and pain. Historically, our ancestors used spirituality, music, prayer, and community to survive unimaginable hardship. Today, many Black women continue that tradition through meditation, wellness practices, support organizations, and safe spaces dedicated to mental health. Organizations like Sad Girls Club work to destigmatize mental health care for women of color and provide spaces where vulnerability is welcomed instead of judged. One thing I learned during my healing journey is this: healing is not linear. Some days you feel strong, some days you feel broken again. Both are part of the process. And healing does not mean forgetting what happened. It means refusing to let the trauma define your entire identity. As Elizabeth Gilbert once wrote, "Ruin is a gift, ruin is the road to transformation." That quote stayed with me because healing transformed me, pain changed me, but it also taught me resilience, compassion, and self-awareness. Malcolm X once said, "The most disrespected person in America is the Black woman. The most unprotected person in America is the Black woman. And the most neglected person in America is the Black woman." Those words still resonate today. Black women continue to experience abuse, violence, and emotional trauma at alarming rates while simultaneously being overlooked in conversations about healing and protection. But our stories matter, our pain matters, and our healing matters. The purpose of this talk is not only to discuss trauma, it is to create awareness, compassion, and action. We need better mental health access, safer communities, inclusive feminist spaces, trauma-informed healthcare, and environments where Black women are believed and supported. Because healing begins when people finally stop asking survivors to suffer in silence. And despite everything Black women have endured throughout history, we continue to rise, rebuild, love, and survive. That resilience is powerful, but imagine how much more powerful Black women could be in a world where survival was not only our only option. And with the end of the informational part of this presentation, I wanted to acknowledge my mother line. I feel very similar to, as Samantha said before, my Sacred Lineages presentation kind of opened a lot for me, and I think it really inspired this presentation and my thesis as well. On the left, we have my great-grandmother, Clara Gomes, who was an immigrant from Portugal that moved to New York around the age of 20. Next to her is my grandmother, who was born with the name Elizabeth Mikaela, but later converted to Islam and adopted the name Aman Abdu Shakur. Lastly, we have my mother, Lorraine Nicholson. I wanted to include a photo of younger me because I truly am that little girl's wildest dreams. I'm beyond thankful to be able to share my story, my research, and even pass along some of the beautiful knowledge from the women that came before me. And with that, thank you for being here and listening, and here are the resources as well that I use in my presentation. And I love every single one of you, and I am so happy for my journey at CIIS, and I'm so excited for the future and to hopefully connect with a lot of you and be able to network more and do some amazing things.
Oh, Maya, that's so important. Thank you. Thank you for bringing this forward. Thank you for sharing on such a deep level. I know so many people need to hear your words, and it brings them hope that they might not have otherwise had. And this is just such an important topic. So thank you. Thank you for being the channel of this wisdom and help and hope. And I noticed at the end of your presentation, you put your information, and I'm not sure if you wanted to put that in the chat because I don't think people would have had time to grab it. So if you want people to be able to contact you, please put it in the chat so they can. And we have time for questions, comments, appreciations for Maya. If anyone would like to do so, you can unmute yourself or raise a hand, but the floor is open for Maya.
So much appreciation for you, Maya. So proud of you and excited for you. Like, no truer words, but you are the wildest dreams of that little child. And the future versions are so excited for what you're doing right now and the choices you're making right now.
Logan, you're gonna make me cry again. I literally said last time I teared up at the presentations, and looking at Logan right now crying is making me want to cry. And looking at the comments in the chat as well. Thank you so much for Dion talking about just taking up space and allowing my voice in my healing journey to be heard as a woman of color. And I think that's truly amazing and truly beautiful. So thank you for Dion for acknowledging that as well. And thank you, Logan, for being so supportive during this whole process. Love you so much.
We still have time if there's other comments, questions, although the chat is blowing up for Maya, so glad you're looking at that. But yeah, if anyone would like to speak, please do so.
Yes, Dion, always.
That was such a heart-tugging presentation. Thank you so much for sharing all that you shared and being so open and honest in this space with all of us and allowing us to see you. My question, one of the things I heard you say was the importance of community, that we can't heal alone. But quite often in these situations, the victim, I'll say victim in this space, is isolated or left to be isolated without any community. What would be maybe a tip or advice you might offer to someone who has no idea that they can't do this alone, or that help is out there and they don't have to suffer alone?
A beautiful question. And I feel like I was that person for a while. I grew up in a household where we didn't talk about mental illness. That didn't exist. I told my mom once that I was feeling depressed, and she took the door like off my room, and that was kind of it. Just to make sure like I wasn't doing anything else like crazy. But it really took me going to college and being in my own space. I feel like I learned a lot more kind of being isolated and by myself rather than um around certain community members. So I think it is who you do community with as well that can be motivating and changing. Um, but yeah, it took me seeing other people around me that were experiencing the same thing, and we would only talk to each other about it. And it would be in passing, just in classes, like, oh, I feel like this. Um, Really sad the other day, had a mental breakdown, not feeling well, dealing with this grief. And I finally decided to go to therapy, to do one-on-one talk therapy where I could just kind of vent and get that out and also get answers back and figure out how to heal because I feel like I didn't know how to heal. Like you said, like how do you even like figure out how to take those steps when you are isolated and alone? And like I said, the hardest thing is to ask for help. And yeah, sometimes it really takes that like earth tugging, like kind of like heart shattering moment where you do really go to ends meet and you do feel the need to ask for help or that change won't happen. And that's really how I felt. I felt like I had no idea how to heal. I had no idea how to start that process alone. And I needed to talk to someone in some way, shape, or form, and that I couldn't keep just having like these random conversations with friends that led nowhere. So I feel like it's really just acknowledging that you are strong and you can get out of this and you don't have to stay in this space and that there is help out there and that there are communities that are willing to like take you like under their arms and really be around with you. And I feel like from there, I started doing research, I started volunteering, and I started doing a lot of like work. And I feel like that really changed a lot for me.
Maya, I'm curious, for anyone watching, what would you want their biggest takeaway to be from everything you've shared?
It's a good question. Um, I think it's really that you're not alone. When you are in those moments in your room, crying, throwing up, sliding down a wall, all that crazy stuff, it really feels like you are the only person going through this. No one has ever went through this before. Um, I dealt with a lot of grief last year, and something that really stuck with me was it was really humbling as well as the phrase, "You're not special." And it was really just the idea of like, someone has gone through this, someone has had the same exact situation and thing happen to them. Like, there is help out there. There are people that do understand how you feel, and there are people that want to help you because they have been in that same position. So I feel like that is the biggest takeaway, that in the best way possible, you are not special, but obviously you are special. But there is someone willing to help you and guide you through what you're going through.
Thank you. And I love that you made "you are not special" a very empowering statement that is very comforting. So thank you for that. Um, I really appreciate it. I am really looking forward to reading your paper. And just one final question, which you absolutely don't have to answer. What was it like for you to do this paper, this research, this presentation?
It's hard. I feel like there are a lot of moments that I feel like I was putting the work off actually because it was hard and was I muted accidentally? Sorry. 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 But I was saying, yeah, while doing this process, it was hard and a lot of things did come up. And once again, mentioning the Sacred Lineages presentation, I completely like had a mental breakdown as well and like backed out of it and had to like record myself doing the presentation and turn it in. I couldn't even present like in the breakout room with other people like so yeah, I think that it was a very hard process, but I do really appreciate the emotions that did come up, and I feel like I take them with me and I move forward and I move into advocacy work and helping other people. And yeah,
Thank you. I appreciate you. And we have time. There's one hand up, so we have time for one more. So go ahead.
Hi, my name's Lisa. I'm a friend of Vivien's, and I was invited to this. I'm not black, I'm white, but my heart is I've been through a lot of trauma, and I had similar but not similar because I'm white and you're black. But as far as the trauma work that I've done, it was easy because I was so ready. It was now done the work, becoming the new person, right? So my question to you is, because I'm still dealing with it, and one thing that has helped is being in a group that other people have gone through that, right? And I find doing a lot of tarot stuff, Tara, a lot of people in that group had a lot of trauma too. So you find your same kind of people. So my question to you is, how is it now that you acknowledge that you've had this trauma and you're working through it, now you're a new person? So that's my question, because that's what I'm going through. I'm changing who I was, who I am.
yes, I feel like that's an everyday acknowledgement.
Mhm.
And I feel like it is tough because habits die hard. And it is really an everyday battle to stay on that path of your healing journey and not wanting to just sink back into that pit or those emotions.
Mhm.
Um, there's a lot of days where I'm just in my room and I'm like, I'm staring at the ceiling and I don't want to go anywhere. I don't want to do anything. And I just constantly think about the fact that I have friends who love me and support me. I have made it more of a thing to kind of like understand that I'm not an inconvenience and text people when I do need help. Like, hey, do you want to hang out today? Like, could really use like a one-on-one and just a conversation, just a hug, you know? Like, I've had friends literally come by just to give me a hug and then leave. And I think that is a beautiful thing. And um, with that, yeah, I do think it is. I have probably can't see, but I have like on part of my wall just kind of like sticky notes, and I also have ADHD, so these habits are really hard to kind of like keep going with, but I look at them every day and I feel like that helps as well. And also my community as well being so loving and so comforting and checking in on me constantly is also a very big part of things. I have people who I text once a month, and that is good enough. And I have people who I text every day, and that is beautiful as well. And I think it's just that those relationships and just knowing that are there no matter what, and that they're sending love your way.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. So it is time for our next scholar. Maya, I really appreciate you and what you've brought. If anyone has more for Maya, if you have questions, comments, thoughts, please go ahead and put them in the chat. Maya will be here the entire time. She will be reading the chat, responding in the chat. So anything, go ahead and put it in the chat to Maya. Okay. Thank you. I am so excited to introduce you to Hailey Hunter. Hailey is a writer, retreat leader, and women's circle facilitator who helps women reconnect with their instinctual embodied selves. Rooted in women's spirituality and social justice, she creates spaces for women to reclaim their voices, trust their intuition, and heal from patriarchal conditioning. Hailey, you've got some wisdom to share with us, please.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be here. I'm going to get my slides up on the screen. All right, does that look good? All right. So, hi, I'm Hailey Hunter, and today I'm going to be presenting on the book I'm writing called Wildish, A Woman's Guide to Reclaiming Her Instinctual Self. Now, before I begin, I want to ask to hold all questions until the end, please, and you're welcome to drop them in the chat if you want to, and I can look at them when I'm finished. This book grew out of both personal experience and the work that I've done throughout this MA program. And my personal story is what brought me here to this calling, to bring freedom to women. I have always worked toward that. And over the past few years, I've found a niche where I feel that I can be of service. So a little background about me, because this greatly informs the book and my work, is that I grew up in a conservative Christian culture where women's voices were silenced, literally and figuratively. So reclaiming my voice was a huge step in my healing process. And I wanted to share this with other women as well. So eventually I began leading healing retreats for women, and I started writing this book about what I was seeing and experiencing. But I quickly realized that while these retreats were very powerful and provided some relief, these women were leaving and going right back into painful or toxic situations. So it felt like I was providing a Band-Aid, but there was a larger wound, and it was systemic. Beneath their pain was larger forces at play, like patriarchy, religion, disconnection from self. And I wanted to be part of a bigger solution and part of dismantling those systems of oppression. I also knew I did not want to be another white woman putting a self-help book into the world without examining my own privilege or developing a deeper understanding of social justice, systems of power, and accountability. And so that's what brought me to this program here at CIIS. My primary audience has been white women healing from the harm of patriarchal religion, especially evangelical Christianity. And that's my positionality and my lived experience, and it's what I am speaking from. And I also want to name that this book is for any person who identifies as a woman and is called to this story and message. And here, this question on the slide is a central part of my work is, how can women return to their true self to live freely and authentically and connected to their intuition? And At the heart of Wildish is this idea that women can change their lives and ultimately the world when they reconnect to their voices, their bodies, their anger, their creativity, and their intuition. This book was inspired by Women Who Run with the Wolves by Clarissa Pinkola Estes, a very powerful and influential book in my life. It's based on Jungian psychology and the wild woman archetype. Estes defines wild as meaning natural, innate, or instinct. This is your deepest soul self that's connected to intuition, living consciously and responsively. And that understanding is central to Wildish. This quote on the screen is what inspired the book, where she writes, "This instinctual self must have freedom to move, to speak, to be angry, and to create. This self is durable, resilient, and possesses high intuition." When I read that, it hit me so hard. This is a roadmap to finding the instinctual self. So this book is rooted in the belief that beneath conditioning and performance, shame and self-abandonment, there is still an instinctual, wildish self within women that knows how to move, speak, create, feel, and tell the truth. It's just been covered up and hidden over years through cultural or religious norms and by inherited or newly experienced trauma. Wild woman is within, and she is the powerhouse of intuition and creativity. This instinct hasn't been lost, but what was buried can become uncovered. This book is about helping women return to that self and showing them how. So what is Wildish? This is a guide for women to return to their instinctual nature, but I want them to understand that that disconnection did not happen in a vacuum. Women's lives are shaped by cultures, religions, families, and systems that often teach them to be quiet, accommodating, and self-abandoning. This leads to illness, depression, burnout, and a general dissatisfaction with life, among many other things. So this book invites women to reclaim voice, body, anger, creativity, and intuition, and not to look at these things as problems to fix, but as pathways back to wholeness. And one of the most important things that I want to make clear in this book, and it's what I've learned throughout this program, is that women's pain is not just individual. There are structural, spiritual, historical, and political components that contribute to these conditions. So in many cases, women are taught that their anger is dangerous or destructive, that their bodies are sinful or bad, that their intuition is irrational and untrustworthy, and that their voices are too much or just not needed at all. And while I totally believe that individual healing is important, this book takes it much deeper than that. Healing is also about resistance. It's about helping women understand that reclaiming themselves challenges all the systems that taught them to disconnect in the first place. Now, the framework behind Wildish. This book is shaped first and foremost by feminist insights into how women are taught silence, self-doubt, and disconnection that is often reinforced through culture, family, religion, and systems of power. Wildish is also shaped by embodied and spiritual practices that help women reclaim voice, intuition, and self-trust. Reading information alone is not enough. I want to share embodied practices that help women come back to themselves through creativity, through storytelling, through connection to their emotions, and through learning to listen to their intuition again. This book is also grounded in an understanding of healing as both deeply personal and shaped by larger systems of power. Healing matters at the level of the individual, but it's also connected to the conditions women are living within and the forces that have shaped their lives. And ultimately, Wildish is rooted in the belief that when women return to themselves, they can transform not only their lives, but the culture around them. Because I really believe that when women trust themselves more deeply, speak more honestly, and live more fully from their own knowing, that change will ripple outward. So this book is going to provide, it's not just about how to return back to your true nature, but it's also asking like, what helps you get there? What are the pathways back to self? So a core idea is that the very things we are often taught to suppress are actually the pathways back to yourself. Voice matters because so many women have learned to soften or monitor or silence their truth. The body matters because women are taught to distrust or disconnect from it when it's actually one of the deepest sources of wisdom. Anger matters because it's not only disruptive, it's clarifying and motivating. Anger tells where there is harm or where boundaries have been crossed and where injustices live and what must change. Creativity and intuition matter because they reconnect women with aliveness and inner knowing and the self beneath performance. So this book will name what has been lost, and it's offering women practical and spiritual ways to reclaim themselves and their power. Now, I want to take just a moment to go have a moment of an embodied practice. So before we continue, I just want to invite you, you can participate if you want to or not, but if you feel comfortable, I just want us to notice where we are. We're just going to practice some noticing. You can take a deep breath to just kind of tune in to what's around you. And I want to bring awareness as you breathe, where your body is, how it feels, where you're sitting or standing. Bring awareness to your breath. Do you notice any tension in your body? We're going to notice our thoughts or our feelings or anything that comes up. We're just going to notice it. So take a deep breath. Do you notice any tension in your body? I don't want you to analyze it or try to process what it all means. I just want you to practice noticing. We live in a world that hurries us and asks us to bypass our body all the time. So let's just take a moment to check in and take a breath. I'm just going to ask you a couple of questions to think about as you're breathing and noticing. Is there a place in your life where you have silenced yourself? Can you feel that in your body? And you may not know, and that's okay. Just keep breathing. Is there a place where you have been taught to just trust your own knowing? Let it be here and just continue to breathe. Then ask yourself, is there a part of you that is asking to be heard but isn't? And just keep breathing. You don't need to fix anything or figure anything out right now. I just want you to notice it. Keep noticing and breathing. Has any anger come up for you recently? What did that feel like in your body? Where did you feel it in your body? Can you ask that anger what it wants to tell you? Again, you don't need to have answers right now. But healing begins when we slow down to actually notice, feel, and listen. Take another good breath in and out. You're worth being noticed. You're worth listening to. Your healing matters. Just take a deep breath and start to return to the room if you can. And if there's anything you want to share in the chat, please do. If you want to be witnessed or held, like drop your experience in the chat if you'd like to. Thank you. I think it's important to pause and take what we're talking about and apply it practically. And this is just a small little thing we can do to connect ourselves. Next, I want to talk about healing and justice, because a core piece of this book is the idea that healing cannot be detached from systems of power. It is personal, but it is never isolated. One of the most important shifts in my own life has been realizing that my spirituality includes justice work. Healing can't simply help women feel better while leaving harmful systems untouched. It has to ask what contributes to women's wounds in the first place. That means this book is shaped by the belief that healing and justice belong together. And for me, as a white woman, that includes ongoing awareness and commitment to social justice, a refusal to detach women's healing from the realities of racism, patriarchy, and other systems of oppression. So when I talk about women returning to themselves, this is more than retreating into a private inner life. I mean a return that is embodied, spiritually grounded, and accountable to a larger world. The spiritual vision of this book is spiritual at its core. Part of what shaped my growing belief is women need spaces to recover spiritual authority within themselves. So many women have been taught, because of patriarchal religion and culture, to look outside of themselves for truth, permission, and power, they have outsourced their knowing. But Wildish is rooted in a different vision, one where women can move from an external authority and reconnect with inner knowing, sacred voice, embodiment, and a spirituality that is life-giving and not controlling. That spiritual aspect has been influenced by women's spirituality, divine feminine, ancestral repair work, and embodied spiritual practices, rituals, and ceremonies. And I've learned so much about all of those things because of this program. One meaningful project I did in this program was I created a voice reclamation ritual that's designed to help women reconnect with their voice through breath, sound, embodiment, and sacred intention. I'll definitely be including that in my book. And probably the most meaningful project I completed, as other people have said, was the Motherline project. It was an ancestral repair ceremony that I did through my Motherline, where I visited the graves of 6 grandmothers in my lineage and confronted both the wounds they carried and the harm they participated in through colonization and slavery. Those experiences shaped my understanding that healing and spirituality, accountability, and justice are inseparable. So Wildish is also about helping women return to themselves through repair work, reclaiming spiritual autonomy, and practicing sacred resistance. Now, what I hope this book creates, ultimately, what I hope this book creates is not just personal change. Of course, I do want that for women, but change that ripples outward. I hope it helps women to trust themselves more deeply and live more freely. I want women to feel less shame and more self-trust and more permission to rest and live in alignment with their truth. I hope it creates communities rooted in love, mutual care, liberation, and justice. Spaces where women can be honest, supported, accountable, and fully themselves. I hope it contributes to a kind of healing that does not stay private, but ripples outward into relationships and culture. Because when women return to themselves, it changes how they love, lead, parent, create, and move through the world. And ultimately, I hope the book is one small contribution to the dismantling of patriarchy and all systems of oppression. Because when women reclaim themselves, they challenge the very forces that depended on their silence, disconnection, and self-abandonment. And I know this book matters because I have lived it. I have seen how the messages and stories I have to share have impacted other women for good too. In closing, a woman returning to herself is no small thing. It is a threat to every system that depended on her silence. When women return to themselves, they do not just heal their own lives, they begin to change the world. Thank you so much.
Wow. You are fire and you are burning it all down. Fabulous. Would you mind putting yourself full screen? There we go. We already have someone nominating you for president in the chat. So I second that. We have time for questions.
Yes. Hi, Alka.
Hi, I love the book cover and the title and how it's rooted in your own positionality and how you talked about, how this is where I am, as a white woman coming from out of evangelical Christianity, but committed to social justice. So actually I have a two-part question. One is because you talked about healing and justice, and I was wondering if there was specific scholarship around healing justice that your work was drawing from. I'll ask that and then I'll ask the other one.
Oh, first, I'm still doing, thank you for that. I'm still doing a lot of research and development. My book is still in the works. I've really been drawn to, in the spiritual activism class, it was so important to me. Caitlin Curtis, is that her name, who wrote Spiritual Resistance? I can't remember the name of the book at the moment. Several of those books specifically, I really love learning from Indigenous women in America. Here now, but to realize that all forms, I used to think justice work was so big and had to look like campaigning and politics. And now I realize that no, like becoming aware of emotions, becoming aware of, using my voice, facilitating spaces for other women to be truthful and real. Those are all ways to commit to justice. Obviously, bell hooks. I mean, all
Yeah.
about love. That's an important aspect. But I mean, I'm still researching a lot and doing a lot to add together, but I would say mostly those kinds of places.
Awesome. So I would really, there's an amazing kind of new literature that's come out in the last decade, specifically around the term healing justice.
Okay, yeah.
And I think that's going to be really useful for you as you develop your work. And then my second question, which is sort of related, is your thoughts on what does it sort of look like to be aware of sort of the oppression as a woman and yet the privilege as a white woman coming out of the dominant religion. What does that sort of look like for women coming out of these types of traditions?
Thank you so much. That looks like a lot of things. I host a lot of women's circles, and I would say they're mostly white women or white passing women in my group. And it's been a good place to be able to speak about our privilege without, I think at first I was like, I want to have women of color in here, but that wouldn't be a safe place for us to discuss our privilege and what that looks like and how to do our own anti-racism work, because I don't want to cause harm to those marginalized people. So I think a lot of it is always making sure we have conversations with each other to bring up stuff. Like, if I hear things happening in conversation, if someone hears it with me, I want them to bring it up with me. I want to be committed to being accountable as a white woman. And I always want to name these things. Like, I always want to name systems of power. I always want to name intersectionality. I always want to name racism in all of the groups that I gather and facilitate, to make sure that we're not centering just the white experience, but taking in a wider lens and view of what that looks like. And at the same time, the obviously white evangelical church needs tons of healing. Like, it's such a problem. So I know that my experience, like, I came from that. I was a white Christian conservative Republican. And so if I can shift, I know it's possible for other people too. So yeah, I think it's
that's fabulous. Yeah, thank you. I think I think that you're very clear that this is the group that needs to I want to work on transforming from within. And I don't want to take up too much time, but you might want to check out Megan Phelps Roper's work. She left the Westboro Baptist Church.
Yeah, I think I know her. I know her. I know of who you're talking about. But thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Alka.
Yeah.
I appreciate those.
Great to see you.
You too. Hi, Natalie.
Thank you, Hailey. That was so inspiring. And I really cannot wait to read your book someday. I hope that it's sooner than later. And you had mentioned that you do some women's circles. So I was wondering, do you have some things coming up, and where can people find that information? I know there's something in the chat there, but I like maybe your Instagram or something. So where do we find that?
Well, currently my women's circles are all locally here in Nashville, in person. I love the idea of doing one online. Right now we're doing a monthly meeting, going through chapter by chapter of Women Who Roam. Here's my copy, Women Who Roam the Wolves. And it's been very, very powerful. Oh, yes, Anna, Dolly is opening a hotel in Nashville. She's our national treasure here. I'd love to begin. I put my retreats on hold while I did this program, so I'd love to start them again, especially with the education I've gained, the knowledge I've gained, the experience I've gained through this. But I have a website, HaileyHunter.com, I think, thehaileyhunter.com. So you can check that out. If and when retreats or circles happen, you can look there. And also my Instagram, I post usually lots of things on my Instagram. So that's where. Thank you, everyone. But I like the idea of doing a virtual circle. I just love getting women together. It's so powerful. I got a bunch of my women on this call today, and it's so encouraging because they've changed my life. Thank you to my women who are here.
Hailey, I am so curious. Over the course of this education and transformation, I know you're already working with women and bringing this back to them. What has the reaction been to everything like just mind-blowing, transformative to your circle?
To my circle. I'm pretty fiery in my circle, and I would say, well, first of all, I couldn't survive without these women. Like, we've grown together. One specifically who's been my partner in these retreats. I feel like we've saved each other's lives. And when one woman speaks up about the truth, about the pain she's experiencing, I think this is true with everyone. You think you're so alone and isolated and that no one else knows. But as soon as you can share that and speak the truth, and someone says, "Oh, me too. Oh, I know. Yes, I feel that too." You're not alone. And it's not you. It's not what's happening. I think it's just been powerful. I've seen women make huge changes in their lives, like letting go of some codependency traits, or deciding they're going to rest and not sacrifice themselves and die on the, hill of martyrdom and motherhood. They're going to take care of themselves now. I've seen a lot of things change. And I think what I've realized, it's the way I live intentionally and model some of these things. And other women think, "Oh, me too, I can do that." And I just think that's why it's so important for us to speak up and talk and share, and not to stay quiet, because we'll all just conform and stay the same all the time if we don't start sharing our truth and talking about our experiences and saying what's hard and saying what's good. Like, we've just all got to learn to share and be in community that way. Did I answer your question?
You did. And, I just want more and more and more, and could sit here for hours. Make sure you check the chat, because I know there's a lot going there. And I did put your information, your website, your Instagram, whatever I have for you, I put in the chat at some point. So if anyone wants to connect with Hailey, you can do so. And Hailey, you have a message from Carrie. Would you like to read it from the chat?
Sure. Like, aloud?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, Carrie, I love you dearly. I'm a woman in Hailey's circle, and it has changed my life. I am waking up, and it's scary, but also it's the most alive I have ever felt. I am bringing what I've learned in the circle to my coaching practice, and so much of this is due to Hailey and the circle she's created. Thank you, Carrie. I love you so much.
Aw. Yay. So we have time for one more question. If anyone has a question, comment, love to give. Let's see. Okay. Hailey, I think the most popular question is, when will your book be released? When?
I don't know.
That's not the answer.
I don't know. Within a year. Let's say within a year.
Yes. Okay.
Let's say within a year. I got to set myself a deadline.
Okay. I can set it for you.
You will, and I'll do it.
December 31st. We got to start the new year wildish.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate the support.
Thank you, Hailey. Appreciate that. Your energy, your book, your work. Wonderful. The world won't know what hit it. So I am very excited to introduce our next scholar, Jessica. Yay! Okay. Jessica Nuñez-LaMarre is a writer, mother, engineer, and spiritual scholar whose work is grounded in spiritual activism. Her writing centers on healing, justice, transformation, and liberation. She is committed to challenging patriarchal norms and giving voice to what many women feel but have been taught not to trust. Jessica, please share your amazing, beautiful story with us.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Yes? Awesome. Thank you, Vivien, and welcome everyone. As Vivien stated, my name is Jessica Nuñez-LaMarre, and I feel so honored to be here and to share this space with these incredible scholars. I love you all. It's making me tear up. As I start, I invite anyone who has questions to please hold them into the Q&A session or to put them into the chat, and we will address them in that Q&A session. Please note I will not be able to see the chat during my presentation. So let's get started. In the Women's Spirituality Master's Program, I learned that centering women's experiences is feminist work. I share this Capstone Colloquium, my story, my healing, and my calling as an intersection of my lived experience and academic rigor. My story is of endless searching, grief, liberation, and the reclamation of spiritual authority through healing, scholarship, spirituality, activism, and justice. My lived experience in this world started with disconnection. What you see in this photo is me in the NICU at 3 days old, and my dad holding me for the first time. What you may not be able to see are the IVs in my head as I was recovering from emergency surgery, in which I was air-backed from one hospital to another to receive an esophageal atresia at 6 hours old because my esophagus was not attached to my stomach. I find it interesting that I entered this world with the inability to be nourished, my gut and my voice severed. And maybe that's why I was given the gift of clairsentience, the ability to sense emotions and energy through feeling. Growing up, the ability to feel everything was difficult. The anger from my father, the silence from my mother, I inherited it all. In the class, Women's Sacred Mysteries, we studied the work of Sherry Mitchell, and I resonated deeply with her experience as she shared. As a young girl, I felt the subtleties of this emotional trauma within my family. I grew up believing that there was something inherently wrong with me. It wasn't until I learned my own history that I was able to start naming and unpacking the trauma that I carried. I grew up absorbing the pain that had no clear language. I learned to doubt my body, my voice, my feelings, and my worth. What I felt was real, but it was hidden and unnamed and handed down to me as if it belonged to me alone. For me, the first wound was not only pain, it was the absence of language for it and the inability to communicate it. My journey often felt lonely, even though I was surrounded by a large Mexican and Italian Catholic family. I often felt, as Sherry Mitchell did, that something was inherently wrong with me. I shared my feelings and emotions to prove what I felt was valid. And when dismissed, I thought my communication was the problem, but it was something greater. Through others' responses, I learned that my feelings and emotions were not a valid form of knowledge. They were never enough. They were not a valid form of epistemology. So I shut down my gift and focused on what I was taught was valid: math and science. No feelings necessary. I went on to become an electrical engineer, and I spent my life proving I was smart enough, good enough, and worthy enough to be in this male-dominated field, where answers are certain with no room for ambiguity or emotions. I worked tirelessly to fill the void I felt, the gap between who I was and who I was taught I needed to be, the gap between what I felt and how I was supposed to feel, the gap that no matter how hard I worked to close seemed to be there. It's like the scar on my back that I cannot see directly with my own two eyes. But I know what is there. I feel it. And sometimes people point it out to me and ask me about it. Filling a never-ending void is exhausting. And in 2017, I found myself stressed, overwhelmed, overworked, burned out, and pregnant with my third child. We were informed that my unborn baby may not live, which changed my life forever. Instead of looking outside of me, I started seeking inside. Instead of praying to a God outside of me, I started praying to my body. And slowly, over time, I was remembering. I didn't quite know yet what it was, but something inside me started to stir. And on Cinco de Mayo, 2018, I gave birth to a miracle. And in that moment, I decided to change my life forever. As Sherry Mitchell says, when pain remains unhealed, it simply gets transferred onto the next person that comes along or the next generation. I no longer wanted to pass the unhealed trauma to my young children or newborn. So I started to seek truth. The funny thing about truth is there's not just one. A monolithic patriarchal culture will tell you there is only one, and that if you don't believe their truth, then it is not the truth. But in reality, there are multiple truths. This monotheistic idea that there is only one truth leads to the idea that there can only be one true religion and one true culture, making other cultures wrong or the enemy. When religion is focused on one truth, conflict is inevitable. Christian hierarchy claims spiritual or religious truth that is defined by one gender for one gender, excludes minorities, and is then imposed on those same minorities. Christian hierarchy breeds patriarchy, and patriarchy demands structural racism and systemic oppression. The history of patriarchy, from the ancient world to the modern world, continues the narrative of women suppressed, oppressed, devalued, and silenced. I could no longer be a part of that Christian hierarchy. Between 2018 and 2022, I left my religion, my marriage, and my job. I went through thousands of hours of healing and earned certifications in dozens of healing modalities. I read all that I could get my hands on. As Caitlin B. Curtis, an enrolled citizen of the Potawatomi Nations, would say, this questioning and deconstruction journey can be difficult and messy, but it is a start, and it is holy work, even if in the end we no longer believe what we believed before. I was deconstructing. I was examining the inherited stories and crumbling the foundation of lies that I inherited. My curiosity and my craving for truth led me to CIIS in 2023. For me, healing required more than a mindset shift. I needed more than positive thinking and New Age books to question the stories I inherited. I needed to know why I questioned my worth and my knowing, why I never felt enough. I wanted to reclaim my way of knowing as valid, that what I felt as a child was worthy as a form of knowing, to ask where shame, over responsibility, anxiety, and self-abandonment came from. I went back and read my CIIS goal statement that I wrote at the beginning of my master's journey. And I wrote, my overall goal in attending CIIS and receiving my master's in women's spirituality is to discover where the feminine went missing on all levels, personally, internally, professionally, externally, and worldly in religion. The lack of feminine presence in the world religions directly correlates to the lack of respect and reverence for the feminine from little girls to Mother Earth. When we uncover truths, they set us free. And I am committed to uncovering truths to set all women free. This journey in seeking the feminine within academia is when study became sacred. Education became a part of healing. Scholarship gave language to my lived experience, and learning became a pathway for liberation and truth. On this healing journey, education became a crucial element in processing trauma and grief, leading me toward deeper self-understanding and empowerment. And the master's program provided an essential education on the impacts of oppression and gave me the ability to articulate my lived experience within these oppressive systems. The scholarship revealed the interconnectedness of personal struggles and oppressive societal forces, opening my eyes and giving me the language to understand the systems that enforce disempowerment, disconnection, and unworthiness. My education opened pathways for understanding pain, allowing me to reclaim my narrative through scholarly research and finding my academic voice. I had language to articulate what I was feeling and experiencing. This newfound language helped me understand experiences and connect personal struggle to broader societal issues and injustices like oppression and patriarchy. I studied feminist theology and Christian herstory, feminist standpoint on religion and spirituality, and the reclamation of understanding and interpreting some of the most sacred texts from the works of people like Lila Fernandez and Weaving the Visions, and opening my eyes to the power of women in religion that has been hidden for millennia, and the church fathers that used patriarchal religion to oppress and suppress women. I studied Mujerista and Indigenous theology, which emphasizes the cultural identity and social justice in the pursuit of spiritual liberation, and read the books of Ada Maria CIIS, as well as Original Instructions by Melissa Nelson. I ended up feeling most aligned with this theology, most likely due to my ethnicity. And I got to experience the liberation of the connection to earth, each other, myself, and a loving creator. I got to experience the validation of women's ways of knowing and academia from books like Extraordinary Knowing and Women's Ways of Knowing. And I also had the privilege of learning and living spiritual activism. And spiritual activism merges faith with social justice efforts, urging individuals to engage in transformative actions that are connected to spirituality. In works like Sensuous Knowledge, Embedded Activism, Living Resistance, and Do Better. I've never had words for what I wanted to do in the world. And these liberating studies not only gave me words, but ways of being and validating what I knew within me. They helped me remember. Yet, as Gloria Steinem says, the truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off. And let it be known, this was not an easy journey. The academic rigor, the realization of false narratives and lies, the embodied experience of truth, they took their toll. There were times of anger and rage in my deep quest for truth, but righteous rage led to truth and action, to changing my perspectives, to social justice engagements, to freedom from oppressive ideologies. One thing I did not expect to experience within this program is grief. Yet in my deconstruction journey, grief and liberation walk hand in hand. Learning much of what I had been taught was a lie created a deep sense of loss and feelings of betrayal. Yet grief became part of my scholarship because it clarified the stakes. An awakening was not only liberating, but it also brought confusion and discomfort. The process of unlearning required narratives, navigating new truths that challenged my previous understanding of self and existence. I needed to grieve what was taken, question inherited stories, study the systems that shaped my identity and suffering, and liberate myself by reclaiming my spiritual authority. Pain became a lens, grief became a teacher, and liberation was always the goal. Scholarship helped me name what was nameless for me and gave a voice to the voiceless within. Spirituality broadened, crumbled, and strengthened, and moved from a condition to a calling. And activism is what was missing all along. Scholarship and spirituality gave way to activism. And activism is not a separate path. They are one calling to educate and empower and liberate through history. Healing is personal, spiritual, relational, and cultural. And reclaiming voice, embodiment, agency, joy, and spiritual authority is part of my liberation. What I always wanted was freedom. And what I did not realize is I had the power to give it to myself. I was seeking her, and I found her. Even through colonization and the commanded monolithic patriarchal God that has reigned for centuries, the divine feminine was never taken from us. She never left us, only buried herself deeper within us. What we see now is her resurrection, yet her resurrection is not an external one. There is no Messiah coming. She is resurrecting from within us. She is the second coming. She rises up within all of us. Thank you.
Wow. Oh, Jessica, so many powerful words and statements. I could just write almost everything you said on a little card and paste it to my walls. You just have such a beautiful gift with words, and the insights that you have gleaned from your journey have been brilliant. Thank you for sharing with us and for sharing so vulnerably. I mean, so much wisdom within you. And this is a beautiful opportunity. If anyone has a question or wants to love up Jessica or make a comment, we have time for that now. And Jessica, also make sure you check the chat because you're getting lots of love. So anyone have a question?
Samantha.
Hi, Jessica. Thank you for giving such a beautiful and just emotional, transformative presentation. Honestly, I feel like the emotion that you gave was just honestly the perfect way to end this session. I feel like just grief work and just letting that out is just so important. So I'm just very grateful to be in the space with you and everyone else here who's given such amazing presentations. And then my question is, over time, during your healing journey, how would you say your relationships have transformed over time, your personal relationships, especially with your parents and your family?
Thank you, Sam. I appreciate it. And I also want to say thank you for everyone for holding this space with me on this journey as I traversed through all of those emotions. And in regards to the relationships, especially with my family, my parents, and my father, as my belief system changed and I shared with them my experience and I went through my healing journey, our relationships just got better and better. The anger and the silence that I inherited healed. And my relationship with my parents is the most magical relationship that I could ever ask for in the whole world. I feel so supported and loved and cared for. Thank you.
Jessica, I know that your work and your healing is rippling out far beyond you. And I just want to ask about how you are transforming the communities that you are in, not just individuals.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I have the privilege of being a part of a very progressive community in Tempe, Arizona. And we do a lot of social justice work, including immigration reform. We also support those who are, we're a community for those who may have been hurt by other religions as well. And we do a lot of work for the divine feminine. We have divine feminine classes. We hold a sacred session on the second Sunday of every month for the divine feminine. So yeah, thank you. Helga?
Hi. I so appreciate your courage, your vulnerability, and just sharing the transformation that's taken place for you. I can even like see it in your face. Um, I'm really struck by the fact that you're an engineer and you're a spiritual teacher and healer. And I have a math background, so I'm like, okay, we're kind of on the same wavelength here. Can you tell me about how your understanding of ways of knowing and how you've come to integrate that more sort of linear form of thinking with the transpersonal or spiritual?
Thank you, Dr. Aurora. So I love the engineering part of me because it drives the research part of me. And that's really, I spend way too much time researching, honestly. And maybe Dr. Gibbons can attest to that because my papers are ridiculously long.
I love it.
But I love the research aspect. I love to dig deep. And also, I don't know if Dr. Collins is still on. She opened my world in Christianity and paganism. And I can't stop reading Dr. Ehrman and Lost Christianities and all of his books. I'm in like 5 books now into his work. So that's the engineering part that gets brought on. But then I also get to bring this transpersonal part back into the engineering world. I'll tell you, this was extremely vulnerable. I've never cried during doing a presentation like this, except for in just like everybody else, the motherline. So thank you all for holding this space for me.
Thank you.
We know we're doing good work when we make students cry. Any other questions, comments for Jessica?
May I say something?
Oh, it's my sister.
I don't know if I can.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm trying to muster it up because I'm looking at her and she's so beautiful. But I just want to say that I'm very proud of you, sis, and how far you've come in your journey. Obviously, we're only 17 months apart, so we've experienced every stage of life together. I'm working on not crying when I speak, but this is a hard one. And I have also started a journey of healing myself that was inspired by my sister, and I just want to say how proud I am of her. And she has always been an inspiration to me, and I love you, sis.
I love you so much, sis. Thanks for listening.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jessica's sister, for sharing. That's very special. Is there someone else who would like to share with us? And you don't have to if you don't feel comfortable. And you can also put any questions, thoughts, comments in the chat. And I put Jessica's website in the chat as well. So if you scroll up a few messages, you'll see that. So you can find your way to Jessica and stay in touch. Any others? Okay. Thank you, Jessica, for your brilliant and amazing work. It is just breathtaking. And all of our scholars, as you see, are brilliant and powerful and here to bring change and healing with a relentless energy. So this concludes our Capstone Colloquium presentations. And on behalf of the students, the Women's Spirituality Department, and the California Institute of Integral Studies, I thank you for your presence, your support, and your care. These students could not have done this work without the love and support of their friends, family, and community. So thank you for witnessing them, for supporting them, for celebrating them, and being here to share in this very, very special sacred space together.